Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
It's quiet now. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that creeps in after years of noise, chaos, and laughter have left their imprint on the walls. Kathy's out shopping. She says it's just for groceries, but knowing her, she'll come back with something for the house, or maybe even something small for me. She's always thoughtful like that. We've been married for 24 years, and in just a month, we'll hit the big 25. A quarter of a century. That thought hits me harder than I expected. It feels like just yesterday I was fumbling with a ring in my pocket, trying to figure out how to propose without making a complete fool of myself. And here we are now, 2 kids grown and gone. The house suddenly feeling so much bigger than it used to. Both kids, Jack and Emily, are off at college. Jack's finishing up his senior year. Emily just started her sophomore. It's strange not having them around. The house used to hum with activity. Jack blasting music from his room, Emily arguing with Kathy about curfews, the constant buzz of their friends coming and going. Now, it's just me and Kathy most days, and when she's out like this, it's just me. I decided it was time to get out of bed. Kathy would probably laugh if she saw me now, lounging around like some retiree when it's barely mid-morning. I reached for the bottle of vitamins on my nightstand, popped the cap, and tipped one out into my hand. Except it didn't land in my palm. The small, round pill bounced off the edge of the table, hit the floor, and of course, rolled straight under the bed. Sighing, I muttered a few choice words under my breath and got down on my knees to retrieve it. It was darker under there than I expected, with a faint smell of dust I hadn't noticed before. I felt around blindly, brushing my fingers against stray bits of lint and an old sock that must have been Jack's before he left for college. Then my fingers closed around something else, thin, crinkly, and very out of place. I pulled it out and stared at it for a moment, my stomach sinking as I realized what it was. A condom wrapper. For a moment, my mind blanked. I just sat there on the floor, holding the thing in my hand like it was some alien artifact. My first thought was confusion. Who the hell? No one's been here. No guests, no parties. Nothing. It's just been me and Kathy in this house for the last 3 months. And then another thought hit me, one that made my chest tighten. I had a vasectomy after Emily was born. We decided 2 kids were enough, and I went through with it, no questions asked. So why would there be a condom wrapper under our bed? That's when it crept in, the thought I didn't want to entertain but couldn't push away. Kathy is cheating on me. Anger bubbled up inside me, hot and sharp, but I clamped it down. What was I going to do? Storm up to Kathy the moment she got home, waving a condom wrapper like it was a smoking gun? That wouldn't get me anywhere. She'd deny it, or worse, turn it around on me. No, I needed more than this flimsy piece of plastic to confront her. I got up, threw on a pair of jeans and a shirt, and grabbed my keys. The house felt suffocating now, every corner suddenly suspect. I needed to clear my head, and I knew exactly who to talk to. Davy Jones. No, not the pirate from the movies. The real Davy Jones, my old friend and a damn good private investigator. He got the nickname back when he was in the Navy, and it stuck, even after he swapped the sea for the streets. If anyone could help me figure out the truth, it was him. When I walked into his office, Davy was leaning back in his chair, feet up on his desk, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. He looked up, grinned, and stood to greet me with a firm handshake. Well, if it isn't Ben Miller, he said, motioning for me to sit. To what do I owe the pleasure? I hesitated for a moment, the words sticking in my throat. But then I told him everything. The condom wrapper, my suspicions, the gnawing feeling in my gut that wouldn't go away. Davy listened, his face serious, nodding every now and then but never interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, stroking the graying stubble on his chin. All right, Ben. I'll help you. Give me a week, and I'll see what I can dig up. But listen, before we go down this road, I need you to think about something. If this is what you think it is, you should be prepared. Talk to a lawyer. Get a sense of what you're looking at, financially and otherwise, if this ends in divorce. The thought made my stomach churn, but I knew he was right. Yeah, I said quietly. I'll do that. Davy stood and clapped a hand on my shoulder. We'll get to the bottom of this, Ben. I promise. I nodded, thanked him, and left his office, the wrapper still burning a hole in my pocket. 2 hours later, I found myself sitting in Butch Reed's office, the man himself leaning back in his chair, his piercing eyes studying me like a hawk sizing up its prey. They didn't call him the best divorce lawyer in town for nothing. The man was a shark, plain and simple. If anyone could give me the hard truth, it was him. After laying out my situation, I waited as Butch flipped through a legal pad, jotting down notes. Finally, He looked up and said, Ben, if this goes where you think it's going, you're looking at losing half. Assets, savings, the house, everything. California's a community property state. It's a clean 50-50 split, no matter what. 50%. Half of everything I'd worked for. Everything Kathy and I had built together. It felt like a punch to the gut. But as much as it stung, I knew one thing for certain. I could lose half my life, my money, my house, but I couldn't stay married to a cheater. Butch seemed to read my thoughts because he leaned forward, his voice lowering. If you're serious about this, Ben, here's my advice. Keep your head down and act normal. Don't give her any reason to suspect you're onto her. If she smells something's up, she'll lawyer up too, and that'll make things a lot messy, eh? I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. I'll do my best, I said. By the time I left his office, I was mentally drained but determined. I needed to play it cool, no matter how much it tore me up inside. When I got home, Kathy was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up and smiled as I walked in, her face the picture of normalcy. It made my chest tighten, but I forced myself to smile back. I've got a business trip tomorrow, I said casually, leaning against the counter. I'll be out for the entire week. That night, Kathy slid into bed beside me, her hand brushing against my arm. I could feel her warmth as she moved closer, her intentions clear. Come on, she murmured softly, her voice carrying that familiar tone. But I couldn't. I'm tired, I said, my voice low and flat. She paused for a moment, then sighed, rolling over to face the other side of the bed. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts churning. Was I making a mistake? What if the condom wrapper wasn't hers? What if it was Jack's? He'd stayed in our room for a couple of nights before he left for college while his was being painted. Could it have fallen out of his pocket? Or maybe I was just grasping at straws, trying to convince myself that this wasn't what it looked like. But then again, what if it was exactly what I feared? What if Kathy was cheating on me? The questions gnawed at me, tearing holes in my resolve. But in the end, I knew I couldn't back down now. I needed to see this through, no matter where it led. The next morning, I got up early, packed a small bag, and booked a cab. Kathy barely stirred as I grabbed my things and left the house, her soft breathing filling the silence as I closed the door behind me. The drive to the outskirts of town was uneventful, the city slowly giving way to open roads and scattered buildings. The motel was as unremarkable as I'd expected. Cheap, clean enough, and anonymous. Perfect for what I needed. I checked in, dropped my bag on the bed and sat down, staring at the peeling wallpaper as the hours crawled by. It was almost evening when my phone buzzed. It was Davy. Ben, he said, his voice calm but with an edge of urgency. Kathy just left the house. She's checked into a motel. My heart skipped a beat. Which one? He paused for a moment, then said, the same motel where you're staying. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding in my chest as the silence in the room pressed down on me like a weight. The thought of Kathy being here, in this motel, burned in my mind. When Davy called again, his voice was calm but insistent. She's in the room next to yours, Ben, he said quietly. Listen to me. Don't confront her. This isn't the time or place. Just leave the room, go somewhere else, cool off. You don't want to make a scene. But I couldn't. No, Davy, I said, my voice strained. I need to know. I need to hear it for myself. Davy sighed heavily, his frustration clear. Fine, but don't do anything stupid. Promise me, Ben. I muttered an agreement and hung up, the phone trembling in my hand. The minutes stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity, until suddenly, I heard voices muffled through the thin walls. At first, I couldn't make out the words, just the sound of Kathy's voice and a man's, a deep, unfamiliar tone. Then, it became clearer. They were having sex. Kathy was very vocal in bed, and then what I heard made my stomach twist. I don't know why you're still with him, the man said, his voice dripping with contempt. The guy's old, washed up. He can't satisfy you, can he? Kathy's voice came next, breathless and filled with something I couldn't recognize anymore. No, he can't, she said, her words cutting through me like a blade. You're the best I've had in a while. He's just so old now. The man laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. Then why are you still with him? Her reply came quickly, without hesitation. I need him to keep the bills running. Now shut up and keep doing what you are good at. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, every muscle in my body tense, every breath labored. The voices from the next room continued, their laughter like acid eating away at me. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, fists clenched, ready to tear through the door and end this nightmare. But before I could take a step, the door to my room opened, and Davy walked in, his expression grim. He grabbed my arm firmly, holding me in place. "Don't," he said sharply, his voice low but commanding. "Not like this. Let me go," I hissed, trying to pull free, but Davy's grip tightened. "Listen to me, Ben," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "They've left the window open. I've got my camera rolling. I'm filming everything. You'll have all the evidence you need. If you storm in there now, you're the one who's going to end up in jail, and that'll screw you over in the divorce." I glared at him, my breathing heavy, my vision blurred by rage. "I don't care about the divorce," I growled. "I want to make them pay." Davy stepped closer, his grip unyielding. "And you will," he said firmly, "but not like this. Think, Ben. If you lose it now, you lose everything." For a moment, I struggled against him, the anger boiling inside me, threatening to spill over. But Davy was stronger, and his words were like a cold slap to the face. Slowly, the fight drained out of me, replaced by a wave of overwhelming grief. I slumped back onto the bed, my head in my hands. I felt broken, humiliated, powerless. The woman I had loved and trusted for over 2 decades was in the next room, tearing apart everything we built together. After a long silence, I stood up, my jaw set, my fists still trembling. "I'll have my revenge," I said, my voice low and steady, though every word burned like fire. "She might take away my assets, but I'll wreck her, like she wrecked my marriage and my trust." After Davy left, I sat in the dimly lit motel room, my head spinning with everything that had just happened. My body felt heavy, like I was weighed down by 1,000 stones. The plan was simple: stay out for 3 days while Davy kept tabs on Kathy. That was the agreement. But sitting there alone, knowing what was happening, felt like torture. By the time Davy called later that night, I was already pacing the room, my fists clenching and unclenching, replaying her words over and over in my head. His voice on the other end of the line was calm, methodical, as if he were trying to keep me grounded. "She and the man left the motel," Davy said. "I've got a positive ID on him. His name's Roger Smith. He's her co-worker." I didn't say anything for a moment, my throat dry and tight. Roger Smith. The name meant nothing to me, but the fact that she was with someone from her office cut deeper than I'd expected. All those late nights she claimed were spent working. Davy continued, keeping his tone matter of fact. "I'll keep watching. For now, just stay put like we agreed. You don't want to make any moves before we've got everything we need." I barely muttered a response before hanging up. The hours that followed were excruciating, every tick of the clock a reminder of what she was doing and who she was doing it with. The next day, Davy called again. His updates were short, clinical, but each word landed like a punch to the gut. "She's been spending time with Roger at his place. It's the same pattern, meeting up after work, staying late. I've got enough footage to make a case." I stayed quiet, gripping the phone tightly.
And
"She's been having sex with him every day," Davy said, his voice steady, though I could sense the hesitation in his tone. "She's doing it at Roger's home." Before heading back home, I met with Butch and Davy in Butch's office. The atmosphere was heavy, the blinds drawn, and the room filled with the faint scent of leather and coffee. Butch leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled, while Davy stood near the window, arms crossed. "So, we're sticking to the plan," Butch said, his voice firm and direct. "Ben, you go back home, keep it cool, and don't let her suspect a thing. The evidence Davy's gathered is more than enough, but the longer we play this smart, the stronger your case will be." Davy nodded in agreement. "You've got to act normal, Ben. No confrontations, no slip-ups. Let her think everything's fine. Meanwhile, I'll keep tracking her movements, just in case she tries to pull anything new." I swallowed hard, the knot in my stomach tightening. "I understand," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "I'll handle it." Butch leaned forward, his expression sharp. "Good. Now remember, if you lose your cool, you lose your leverage. Keep that in mind every second you're in that house." With a deep breath, I nodded. We reviewed the details one last time before I left. The weight of what was ahead felt suffocating, but I was resolved to see it through. When I arrived home, Kathy was in the kitchen, her face lighting up when she saw me. "You're back," she said cheerfully, coming closer as if to hug me. I stepped back, raising a hand. "Wait," I said quickly. "I think I might have been exposed to COVID-19. Someone at work tested positive, and I'm not feeling great. I don't want to risk getting you sick." Her face shifted to concern. Oh no, are you okay? Do you have symptoms? Just a bit of a sore throat, I lied, keeping my tone calm. But I think it's best if I stay in the guest room for a few days, just to be safe. Kathy nodded, her worries seeming genuine. Of course. Let me know if you need anything, tea, soup, whatever. I'll take care of you. I nodded, forcing a small smile. Thanks. I'll manage. She hesitated for a moment, then asked, do you think we should cancel the anniversary party? It's only a few weeks away. I shook my head, keeping my expression neutral. No need for that. I'll be fine in a few days. While I'm in isolation, I'll use the time to plan the anniversary celebrations. Her face softened, and she smiled. That's sweet of you. I nodded again, keeping my composure. Inside, I was anything but calm. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the silence of the guest room. I picked it up, already knowing it was Davy. She left the office during lunch, he said without preamble. She's at Roger's house again. Same routine. My jaw clenched, but I said nothing, letting him continue. I've sent you the videos and pictures, Davy added. You should have everything in your inbox. I stared at the phone for a moment before opening the email. There they were, clear, undeniable proof of her betrayal. Kathy stepping into Roger's house, the two of them tangled together in ways I didn't want to imagine. For a few minutes, I just watched in silence, the bile rising in my throat. My hand tightened around the phone, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. Finally, I broke the silence. If I wasn't her husband, I said, my voice cold and detached, I'd probably enjoy these videos. But now, she just makes me sick. There was a pause on Davy's end before he spoke again, his tone measured. I know this isn't easy, Ben, but it's only a matter of time now. 7 days in isolation felt like an eternity, but I knew I had to stick to the plan. Kathy was too oblivious, too wrapped up in her little world to suspect anything. When the time came for me to come out of isolation, I did so with as much composure as I could muster. I forced myself to rejoin her, to act like everything was normal. She was eager, of course, probably hoping things would go back to how they used to be. But when she tried to pull me close, I didn't let her. I'm still feeling weak, I said, my voice steady despite the mess inside me. I don't think I'm up for anything tonight. She frowned, her concern genuine. You've been sick, Ben. You should take it easy. I will, I said, but I'm really not feeling great. The next day, I went to get a full STD check. I needed to know the truth, to make sure I wasn't walking into a disaster. The clinic was quick and efficient, and I tried not to think too hard about what might come back from the results. But I had to know. When I returned home, I started sending out invitations for the anniversary party. Family, friends, everyone I could think of. The party was happening, and I was going to make sure it went off without a hitch. That afternoon, the phone rang. My kids called to confirm they would be there to celebrate. I felt a small flicker of something warm at the sound of their voices, but it didn't last long. Later, Kathy came up to me, looking softer than usual. I love you, Ben, she said, her voice sincere. I'm so happy to have you as my husband. I gave her a small, empty smile, the mask firmly in place. I know you are, honey. A week later, the day finally arrived, the anniversary celebration. It was all set. The house was filled with people, their voices ringing through the rooms, laughter echoing off the walls. Everyone was congratulating me, telling me how lucky I was, how beautiful the years had been. Kathy was radiant, as usual, beaming with that bright, almost innocent smile she always had in front of guests. She had invited people from her office, of course. Roger was there, too, with his wife. I couldn't stop myself from noticing how they exchanged glances, how Kathy was practically glued to my side while he stood nearby, pretending to be engaged in conversation with someone else. I didn't invite anyone from my office. I could have, but I didn't want them there. Not while this charade was playing out. Kathy found it odd that no one from my work was around, but I had a quick answer prepared. They're all tied up in an important meeting, I said, my voice smooth, not giving her a reason to doubt it. It wasn't exactly a lie. It was just a little creative truth. But I didn't need anyone from my office there. Kathy's parents arrived soon after, congratulating us, showering us with kind words. I forced myself to smile and thank them, but inside, I was anything but happy. They didn't know the truth, of course. They didn't know what I knew. Kathy, for her part, held on to me throughout the evening, her arm around mine, her smile never faltering as she greeted everyone with that same practiced enthusiasm. She was so intent on making sure everyone saw how perfect everything was, how perfect we were. But all I could think about was how long I could keep up the act. The evening was in full swing, everyone mingling, laughing, congratulating. It was almost too much, too perfect. And yet, I had to remind myself that this was only the calm before the storm. Then Davy and Butch arrived. I had been waiting for this moment, the moment when everything would finally come crashing down. I had spent weeks setting it up, planning every detail. Now, it was time to execute. I asked Kathy to let go of my hand, her touch a constant reminder of everything I had endured. She didn't question me, just smiled and continued to greet our guests, blissfully unaware of what was coming. I walked over to the giant screen we had installed for the occasion, and as I stood in front of it, the lights dimmed. Suddenly, I was visible to everyone. I grabbed the mic, my heart pounding in my chest, but I pushed through it. "I'm grateful that everyone is here tonight," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "Everyone here matters a lot to me and to Kathy." The crowd murmured, nodding, smiling. "I've been married to Kathy for the last 24 years and 6 months," I continued. Kathy tried to sneak in, her voice quiet but urgent. "No, it's 25 years. I smiled, a small, knowing smile, and looked at her. "I'll explain, honey." Then I turned to Davy, who was holding the large, carefully wrapped portrait-sized gift. "Davy," I said, "please, present the gift to my wife." Davy walked up to the stage, the gift in his hands. Kathy, still smiling, moved toward him, standing next to her parents. She didn't know yet what was coming. As her father helped her unwrap the gift, I could feel the tension building. Every second felt like an eternity. The shock on Kathy's face as the image appeared was everything I expected, but it didn't make it any easier to watch. It was Kathy on top of Roger having sex with him. She screamed, her voice piercing the tension in the room, and her father's reaction was just as I'd anticipated, angry, furious. "Ben, what is the meaning of this? This is a very sick joke," he shouted, the rage in his voice almost drowning out the shock I was feeling. I glanced at my father-in-law, trying to keep my voice calm despite the boiling anger inside me. "It's not a joke. That image is just a better screenshot of the video I'm about to play." The image was only the beginning, and I'd prepared for it. Davy moved to the controls, and I could hear the clicks of the buttons before the video filled the giant screen. Kathy on top of Roger, and the words Kathy had spoken in the video echoed through the room, her voice almost unrecognizable. "I'm keeping him just to keep the bills rolling." The impact of those words hit like a punch to the gut, but I'd heard it before, so this time it did not hurt at all. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. I could feel every eye in the room on me, but I didn't falter. A man in the black suit appeared suddenly, his calmness only adding to the surreal nature of the scene. He moved with purpose, not even glancing at Kathy, whose face was still twisted in shock. He walked up to her, his steps deliberate, and handed her the manila envelope with one simple sentence. "Mrs. Miller, you have been served." Kathy froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the envelope, but she didn't open it. Her eyes darted between the man and me, confusion and anger swirling on her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Without hesitation, the man turned, walking past her to Roger, who was standing rigidly, his own expression a mix of surprise and guilt. The man in the black suit handed him another envelope, his voice steady as he said, "Mr. Smith, you have been served." Roger's eyes widened as he took the envelope, glancing nervously at Kathy, who was still processing everything. But before he could say anything, the man moved on, almost as if he had done this 100 times before. Next, the man walked to the CEO. The room seemed to shrink as the man approached, his footsteps echoing off the walls. He handed the CEO his envelope, the same words slipping from his lips. "Mr. Thompson, you have been served." The CEO, a man I'd respected not long ago, took the envelope with a furrowed brow, his face paling as he processed the situation. "What is this?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. But the man didn't answer, turning away and exiting the room just as quickly as he had entered. "Mr. Thompson," I began, locking eyes with the CEO, my words slow but deliberate. "That is a lawsuit for not enforcing the company's morality code. Your employees were out on lunch, going home to have some immoral sex." The room was silent, everyone still processing the events unfolding. I could see Thompson's face twist in confusion and anger, but I didn't care. He had played his part in this betrayal too. I turned to Roger, the man who had not only destroyed my trust but shattered my marriage. "Mr. Smith, You've been served for alienation of affection and breaking down my marriage. I could hear the words echo in the room, the sting of them hitting hard. But then my gaze shifted to Kathy. I swallowed hard, but I didn't let myself waver. She was the one who had hurt me the most, the one who had chosen this path and destroyed everything we had built. And Kathy, you just got served for divorce. Her eyes were wide now, her lips trembling, but I wasn't done. I had to make this clear. I had to make her understand. I previously said that we've been married for 24 years and 6 months. Yes, it's true. But the truth is, our marriage died the day you went out to screw this guy. The words tasted bitter, but they were the truth, and I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. And from our investigations, we know it started 6 months ago. I saw the flicker of guilt and anger in her eyes, but I didn't care. She had made her choice, and now it was my turn to make mine. I don't care why you did it, I said, my voice hardening, the finality in my words ringing through the room. I don't need to know. Just get out of my house. And just like that, I felt something inside me click into place. It was over. The days following that moment felt like an endless waiting game, but the chaos hadn't stopped. Kathy's parents were relentless, calling me, coming over, trying to talk me down from what they saw as a rash decision. They begged me, pleaded with me to forgive Kathy, to give her another chance. Ben, you don't understand. Kathy's going through something, her mother insisted, her eyes full of concern. You've been together for so long. You can work through this. Her father, usually a man of few words, joined in with a more direct approach. You can't just throw away 24 years. Think about the family. Think about everything you've built together. But I was resolute. I had made my decision, and nothing was going to change that. The betrayal had cut too deep. There was no coming back from this. I didn't need their pleading or their well-meaning advice. I had given Kathy more than enough chances to be honest with me, and she had chosen to lie, to deceive. It was over. Still, Kathy didn't give up. As if the truth of everything we'd been through wasn't enough, she fought back with a new, strange excuse. At the hearing, her eyes filled with tears, and she looked at me with a pleading expression. Ben, please, she started, her voice cracking. I've been going through a lot. I have a hormone imbalance, and that's why I wanted more sex. You weren't able to provide that for me, and that's why I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, this was her excuse? I looked over at Butch, my lawyer, and saw the skepticism on his face. He was quick to respond. Ms. Miller, you have never informed my client about this hormone imbalance issue. In fact, there are no medical records or doctor's test reports to substantiate your claim. Kathy flinched at Butch's words. Her eyes darted down, clearly caught off guard. The judge, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward, a stern look on his face. Ms. Miller, if there was any such medical issue, why didn't you inform your husband? Why didn't you take the necessary steps to address it with him, especially if it was affecting your marriage so drastically? Kathy remained silent for a moment, and I could see the frustration building in her. The judge didn't give her time to form a response, continuing with an air of finality. If you truly had such an issue, you should have communicated it with your husband. And now, we find no substantial proof. The court finds no grounds for reconciliation. The weight of his words felt heavy, but it was what I had expected. I'd made my case, and I knew there was no turning back now. I was done trying to make sense of her actions. The judge finally concluded, after 7 months of back and forth, that the divorce was granted. The divorce had done its damage, but the fallout didn't stop there. Jack and Emily, my kids, were in the middle of all this chaos. They didn't take sides, but their silence spoke volumes. They were angry at Kathy for what she had done, but they were also angry at me for how I exposed her. I couldn't blame them. I had put everything on display, torn apart the life they knew, and even though it was justified in my eyes, I understood that the way I handled things had hurt them. They stopped communicating with both of us. As much as it pained me, I knew it was their way of dealing with the betrayal. I kept my distance from them, trying to give them space to heal. It wasn't easy. Not knowing where I stood with them left a hole that nothing seemed to fill. But I had made my choices, and now I had to live with the consequences. Financially, things had changed too. My assets had been reduced by half after the divorce settlement. Everything I had worked for, divided down the middle. But as hard as it was to watch everything I had accumulated over the years slip away, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Kathy had taken her share, but my dignity, my self-respect, they were still mine. I had kept those intact. Roger wasn't faring any better. He was in his own battle, fighting for a divorce from his wife. I knew she had hired Butch to represent her, and there was no way he was going to come out of that without a major dent. The guy might have played a role in the destruction of my marriage, but his own was falling apart, and it was only a matter of time before the damage hit him too. The CEO, on the other hand, wanted this whole mess to go away. He had his own interests to protect, and the public scandal was bad for business. It wasn't long before I got a call from him, arranging a backdoor meeting. The offer was simple, $1 million for me to withdraw the case. They wanted silence, closure, and I was the key to that. I had already divorced Kathy, and I wasn't looking for more revenge. I had made my peace with the decision, and if this money would end the chaos and give me some financial cushion as I started this next chapter, then I'd take it. So, I withdrew the case. I still keep the $1 million with me, a symbol of the deal I made to end it all. 3 years later, I'm sitting on the porch of my little farmhouse, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the colors bleeding across the sky in a way that only the countryside can offer. The air is crisp, the world feels quieter here, and it's the peace I've been craving for years. I'm surrounded by my animals, 2 German shepherds, Max and Duke, both loyal and protective, their eyes always watching, as if they're making sure no one or nothing can hurt me anymore. They're more than pets. They're my companions, my constant reminder that I'm not alone out here. The farm itself is small, nothing extravagant, but it's mine. I've spent the past year learning the ropes, feeding the chickens, working the land, fixing fences, and finding satisfaction in the simple, repetitive tasks that make up a day. It's a different kind of life than the one I left behind, but it's the life I needed. I found a sense of purpose here that was missing for too long, something grounding. There's a rhythm to it, the animals, the land, the seasons. I've stopped rushing. It's like time here moves slower, and I've learned to appreciate every moment of it. What's even more surprising is that my kids have started visiting again. Jack and Emily, the 2 people I thought I had lost forever, have come around. It hasn't been easy, and it's still awkward sometimes, but I can see the walls coming down between us. They're older now, with their own lives and their own battles, but every visit feels like progress. We talk about the farm, about life, about things that don't feel as heavy as they once did. I'm not trying to fix anything anymore. I'm just here for them, when they need me. As for Kathy, well, I've heard through the grapevine that she's living with her parents now. From what I gather, she's under therapy, trying to work through everything that happened. I didn't expect things to be easy for her. She's facing her own demons, and I can't help but feel a small sense of empathy for her, even after everything. It's not my problem anymore, but it's hard to completely shut off the person I once cared about. I'm not bitter about it, though. I'm not angry. I've let all of that go. In this quiet place, I've learned that holding on to rage only keeps you chained to the past. And I'm not living in the past anymore. I've moved on, and for the first time in years, I'm actually happy. I wake up to the sound of the birds, the wind in the trees, and the occasional bark of my dogs chasing after something. I have everything I need right here. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.